talk about it. Was it a year ago, Mike? How long ago was it? Yeah. Was everyone here at that one? Yeah. Anyone not here at that one? Oh, okay. I gotta know which jokes I can reuse. Just to add in one detail that I mentioned last time, but people may not remember. I am, this FFB, this from birth. I'm sorry, I completely lost. Coming from Jerusalem to here, you drop down 2,500 feet, and I cannot hear a thing out of my right ear, which is super annoying. But there's FFB from birth. There's BT Balchuva. I'm FFA from Aish. I went to public school, New Rochelle High School. You heard I went to Vassar College. I studied Russian language and literature. 7 years I studied Russian in high school and college. I wanted to do international business. I thought that would be a good language to know. Now I'd definitely be learning Spanish and Mandarin. You guys start really on time. I'm impressed. You sure you're Jewish? I was once speaking in Basel, Switzerland. I started 2 minutes late and the host apologized. Only in Switzerland. Anyway. So I decided before going to college, because I wanted to actually speak Russian before going to grad school, in business. Because you want to speak a language, what do you have to do? Live there. I always say, you want to learn Spanish? Go live in Florida or Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. So I decided I'm going to go half a year as a graduate student, University of Moscow, and then I'd never been to Israel, so I signed up for kibbutz ulpan, hang out with Danish volunteers, pick grapefruits, work on my suntan, go to grad school. When I went off to Russia, it was the Soviet Union. Some of you remember that. Actually, a lot of you remember that. Well, most of my students are like 20 years old. They don't remember anything. Their phones know everything. They know nothing. But when it was the Soviet Union, it was illegal for a Jew to even own a book in Hebrew. You get arrested for trying to study or practice Judaism. The first lesson I learned is if you want to get a Jew to do something, just tell them they can't. If the Congress would outlaw Torah, every Jew would run off to yeshiva. And if I can get Scarlett Johansson to go to Neve Yerushalayim, I get 50,000 guys also to go to yeshiva. But that's a separate. Anyway, so I ended up cutting most of my classes and hanging out with hundreds of young Russian Jews who were risking their life to secretly keep Shabbat, secretly learn Hebrew, no books. You had to memorize everything. I was so blown away that I said, there's got to be more to this Jewish stuff. So I'm going to go to yeshiva instead of going to kibbutz. I checked into Aish Torah for 3 months, which has now turned into 1 month and 43 years. Thank God. My brother came a year later. My sister came a year later. My parents had 3 of their 4 kids become frum. They made aliyah. So Baruch Hashem, we're a Zionist success story. Anyway, I wear the 2 hats. I wear the rabbi hat and I wear the historian hat. And history is the great black hole of most Jews' education. I'm doing a survey, by the way. I've been asking thousands of yeshiva guys. And these serious guys who are learning Gemara like for 10 years. How many of you have read all of Tanakh? I am at 7 guys out of an estimated 3,000 or 4,000. It's kind of scary, actually. As a Gemara, this piece of Talmud that God asks us, did you try all the fruit I put in this world for you? Now he's going to add a new question. Did you read the book I gave you? But history is a fantastic topic, and I like to combine the two to always look at the deeper message. I created this presentation, which apropos of everything we've gone through since October 7th and what's going on, and now things are changing because of January 20th. We have a new president in America, and he's reading the riot act to Hamas. We're all like, shpilkas, what's going to happen? But we need to pull back and look a little bit deeper at what is going on. I give a lot of classes on university campuses dealing with explaining the Arab-Israeli conflict. That's a very superficial level. We can knock that out. The baseless Palestinian claim of that we are the foreign occupiers, I don't have to tell you, oppressing the indigenous population. Zionism is probably the most successful decolonializing success story in all of human history in terms of an indigenous people coming back and reclaiming and reestablishing their country. I could take it to a deeper level of talking about another thing you can't mention, which is the Islamic worldview, which you just can't touch. But it plays a huge role in what goes on in the Middle East. But the deepest level is, of course, the level of his story, God running the show, what's going on the deepest level. And there's some really interesting Jewish sources about this. So I want to peel off a bunch of the layers. It actually says, it's a very famous statement, this Ayin Panim B'Torah, the 70 faces to the Torah. When you read a story in the Torah, like in Bereshit, there's like the superficial level of Abraham and Sarah and Yaakov and Esav, but there's always deeper levels until eventually you leave the plot behind and you enter into a completely different, almost disconnected from the story level of understanding. So to peel a couple of layers off of the story that we see in the newspaper, we get to some very interesting understandings of what is really going on, what is truly driving this animus between us and our cousins, and they are our cousins. They're our brother from another mother, as we know. And therefore, we get a lot of insight into what we really have to do. As opposed to focusing on the symptoms, let's focus on the cause. So I want to begin by reading a quote from, I'm going to be drinking a lot, I apologize. I got like 8 glasses here. I take a bathroom break in the middle, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm an American. I'm allowed to talk about these things. Who's British here? Who's South African?
Yeah.
Oh, lots of South Africans. Lekker, how's it? Aussies, any Aussies? Oh, good day. Okay, and everyone else is American? Anyone else exotics? Canadians. I'm sorry, Toronto? Bathurst? Just checking. Okay. Anyway, okay. So the Rambam, we all know. Rambam, born in 1134 in Cordoba in Spain. He died in Fustat in Cairo in 1204. He's buried in Tiberias. The Rambam, 1,000 years ago almost, was writing to the Jews of Yemen who were undergoing forced conversion at the hands of the Muslims. It's called Igeret Te'eman. And in it he writes the following. He says, the nation of Ishmael persecutes us severely and devises ways to harm us and debase us. None is matched in debasing and humiliating us. None has been able to reduce us as they have. We have done as our sages of blessed memory have instructed us, bearing the lies and absurdities of Ishmael. We listen, but we remain silent. In spite of all this, we are not spared from their wickedness and their outbursts at any time. On the contrary, the more we suffer and choose to conciliate them, the more they choose to act belligerently towards us. No matter how much we suffer and elect to remain at peace with them, they stir up strife and sedition. As David predicted, I am all peace, but when I speak, they are for war. You could put this on the front page of a newspaper today. Nothing changes. It's unbelievable. So with that understanding in mind, let's now go back and look a little deeper. I want to begin by looking at a source that goes back 500 years ago. This is Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital was the chief student of Rabbi Isaac Lurie, the Ari, who is, we think of Sfat, we think he's actually born in Or Chaim Street in Jerusalem in the old Yeshuv Court Museum, if you walk by it next time when you're walking to the Rova. But he didn't write anything down, the Ari, but his main student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, wrote a number of books. One is called Eitz Hadas. And in this book, he says, at the end of days, meaning as we approach the Messianic era, Israel is destined to experience the Ishmaelite exile. This 5th and last exile will be the most difficult of all. It is the exile of Ishmael. That's got a lot of interesting artwork in this presentation. I pulled off the internet. Most of it from like Christian sites. So they have all these blonde Jews in it looking like, you'll see, it's very funny. But that's supposed to be Daniel in the Lion's Den, which is chapter 5 of the book of Daniel. But what Rav Chaim Vital is talking about is the book of Daniel quotes this vision he has in chapter 7, as we'll see, here it is. Daniel related the following. In my vision at night, I saw 4 winds of heaven stirring up a great sea. 4 mighty beasts, different from each other, emerged from the sea. So he has this vision. The book of Daniel is very hard to read. It's a lot of prophecy, very esoteric, and also largely, and lots of it is in Aramaic. But we have these 4 beasts that appear in Daniel's vision, and we understand, the rabbis understand, these represent not 4 exiles, literal exiles, but the 4 great ancient oppressors of the Jewish people, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. So what Chaim Vital is adding in is a chidush, a new idea. Fast forward literally, this is taking place, Daniel's dream is taking place, 2,500 years ago. Fast forward to literally today. And he's saying there's going to be a 5th and final exile, the Ishmaelite exile, which he talks about here. This 5th and exile will be the most difficult of all, the exile of Ishmael. So we know there's a concept in Judaism of spiritual genetics that we all know. Everyone took biology, right? You know, you have DNA, chromosomes. I love looking at it. It doesn't work in like Korea because everyone has like half a kid on average. But in Israel, it's great when you have these families with a lot of kids, 6, 7 kids. I love looking at which model kid it is. Daddy model, like they say, it's not fair. The women do all the work and the kids look like the father anyway. Daddy model, mommy model, hybrid model. But Judaism has the idea of spiritual genetics, that you pass on to your children, not just your DNA, but certain character traits that are innate in who you are. I have a whole presentation on this called Driven. It's actually very interesting to explain the unique, disproportionate impact that Jewish people have on the world. This is Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who was writing in the 18th century in his book Derech Hashem. He talks about how the original 70 nations, I'm not even going to read the quote, you can read it as I'm speaking, but he talks about the original 70 nations that we traditionally have after Noah. Each of these were basically couples that had children who had children who had children who had children, and you basically get one large family tree that became a nation. And this doesn't work today in Western countries, especially not America, Canada, that are immigrant countries, because it's like a mushmash of people from all over the world. But if you could beam yourself back thousands of years ago, you'd bump into a guy on the street, you'd talk to him for 10 minutes, and you go, oh my God, what a Moabite thing to do. Or stop being such a Canaanite, that kind of thing. So today we don't see this so much. Now, we Jewish people, by the way, for everyone who is Jewish, demographers estimate there are hundreds of non-Jews with Jewish blood. You know that? There's an estimated 200 million people in South and Central America of Jewish ancestry who are not Jewish. Many of them actually don't know they're Jewish, but they probably are. And a lot of Jews have left the Jewish people, opted out. But the core of who we are goes back to Abraham and Sarah. This is proven genetically, by the way. Have you seen the Jewish genetic studies? That we all have a Middle Eastern haplotype. Ashkenazim less so than Sephardim because we interact. You know, Ashkenazi males are 45 to 75% genetically Italian. Isn't that cool? That's why we like Italians so much. Like working class Jews. They talk with their hands. Who's seen my big fat Greek wedding? That's the Greeks, all the Jews. You remember that scene when they're barbecuing the lamb on the front lawn as the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant family shows up and they bring a bundt cake. And the Greek mother is like, who brings a cake with a hole? Anyway, but the core of who we are is Abraham and Sarah. And again, I'm going to do the short version. I have an hour-long presentation on just this topic. But what sets Abraham and Sarah apart, the Jewish personality genetics are the following. One, radically transformative free thinking. Jews are always outside the box. Non-Jews can be free thinkers also, but Jews are way more. Jonathan Sachs wrote a book, Radical Then, Radical Now. It's always been the Jewish thing to be radical. Driven. What does it take to push radically transformative ideas on the world? A lot of chutzpah. You got to be very driven. Non-Jews can be driven, but Jews are disproportionately driven, which is why we're 0.2% of the world's population, but have 22% of all the Nobel Prizes since 1901, which is 11,500% more than we should have. That's like crazy. And the third thing is we're caring, chesed. Okay, non-Jews can care too, but Jews are disproportionately obsessed with caring, which is why you take any cause to make the world a better place in the last 150 years. Any political ideology, communism, socialism, feminism, black civil rights, Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, if it isn't founded by Jews, it's going to be run by them, or probably run and founded by them. We love tikkun olam, fixing the world. That's the Jewish personality right over there. But there are other characters in the story. So if you study Abraham and Sarah, you get the progenitors, both biologically and personality of who we Jews are about. And they have the right stuff to make the nation that's going to be the light to nations. But we know there are other characters, and you guys are a well-educated audience. We know that Abraham, Sarah's barren until she's 90 years old. That's not so good. And what is she, we all know the story. What does she do to ensure that Abraham has some biological offspring? She does what? She gives her handmaiden. Who's her handmaiden? Hagar. Who's Hagar? She's not some Venezuelan woman like foreign worker brought in, like to have you. She's Pharaoh's daughter. In the Middle East, you get really interesting gifts. Please, my friend, take a daughter and a camel. Like that. So that's by the way called polygamy. It's actually called trouble, but it's actually the Torah word for the second wife. What's the punishment for polygamy? You get two mothers-in-law. Sorry. That's why Jacob was smart. He married his sisters. Anyway, but she gets pregnant, we know, right away, and she gets chutzpah. If Sarah's so great, why didn't she get pregnant? And what does Sarah demand? Throw her out of the house. And this story is what happens. And an angel of God appears to Hagar. And the angel says, I will greatly increase your offspring, and they'll be too numerous to count. Behold, you will conceive. Now, the obvious question you should ask, which is what Rashi's always answering, what do you mean, behold, you conceive? She's pregnant already. So the Midrashim, which Rashi is always quoting, tell us that she miscarries this child. Behold, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for God has heard your prayer. And he shall be a wild ass of a man, and his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand shall be against him, and over all his brothers shall he dwell. Now, by the way, Judaism is history's most politically incorrect ideology. With you don't have to worry about this. When you have sensitive American liberal college students, they read this stuff and they're like, start smoking, smoke comes out their ears, wild acid, man. God is, by the way, not PC either. We know that. You want to be politically correct. No one gets offended, but you miss the truth. As Ben Shapiro always has in his computer, facts don't care about your feelings. So the description of Ishmael can be a little bit harsh, but that's the reality. If what is said about Abraham and Sarah is the essence of who we Jews are, for better and for worse, there's negative sides of those radically transformative driven stuff. What's said about Ishmael, who's the progenitor of whom? The Arabs. And they agree. That's one of the only things they agree with us on. If you want to know the other one, go listen to Tim Minchin, Australian comedian, songwriter, pianist. He wrote a song called Palestine Peace Anthem. It's hysterical. Anyone seen this? It's like, we don't eat pigs, you don't eat pigs. Seems it's in that way forever. So if you don't eat pigs and we don't eat pigs, why not eat pigs together? That's the Palestine Peace Anthem. But besides not eating pork, they agree they're our brother from another mother. But look, this is a really interesting right over here. She's told in advance, you're going to have a boy, which is great. She can get on the family chat group on WhatsApp and tell people what colors to wear, buy clothes to buy for the kid. No pink, get the green. The kid's named in advance. That's also easy. But go to his name. What is his name? Ishmael. What does Ishmael mean? God listens. We're already told. This is very unusual that he's told in advance, and his name has God's name. This is a huge point that the rabbis for hundreds of years love focusing on, that it is Ishmael's name is God's name. God hears. So we say that from Ishmael will come the Arabs, and we see not only will different peoples come from Abraham, who's told he's going to be Av Hamon Goyim, father of many nations, also different faiths come out of Judaism. The mother faith is Judaism, but what are the offshoot faiths of Judaism that wouldn't exist without us? Christianity and Islam, exactly. And we know that today, and again, this is an important point, most Arabs are Muslims, but most Muslims aren't Arabs. You guys know that. Only 30% of Muslims are Arabs. What's the largest Islamic nation in the world? Some people think it's France. Soon it will be. Indonesia, very good, right. You know, India and Pakistan split in 1947. Pakistan was created as the Muslim country. You know that it has 200 million people. India's Muslim minority is 400 million people. Imagine having some Muslim minority. It's big in the population of the United States. And Islam is spread everywhere, like all the way out to the Far East. We see it's the fastest growing religion amongst blacks in prison in America. It's called Prislam. It's called Prislam. Interesting. Cool. Not our topic. Anyway, so out of this relationship will come Ishmael, will come Arabs, and the faith that comes out of them, which is a byproduct of Ishmael's personality, right? He's the one who's going to create this faith that's going to reflect who he is. Okay, so we have Ishmael. Now, what's said about him is he's going to be Pere Adam. Now, we know that in English, what comes first, the adjective or the noun? Adjective modifies the noun. Big boy. What's the adjective? Big boy. How do you say big boy in Hebrew? Yelad Gadol. So it's backwards, boy big. Okay, so it says Pere Adam. What's his essence then, we're being told? His wildness. And there's and then it has this thing, and Yad Kol Bo, his hand will be in everyone. What does this mean? So you go to Rashi, and Rashi says, of course, he's from Troyes outside Paris 1,000 years ago, who's, as I said before, always answering the most obvious questions you should ask if you're thinking when reading the text. And he's almost always quoting a midrash. One who loves deserts, that's the Arab ideal, the Bedouin ideal. Excuse me. To hunt animals, he will be a bandit. All hate and attack him, and his offspring shall be great. Not very politically correct. But the Bedouin ideal it's being this nomadic people, a bandit. By the way, traditionally, the Islamic economic opportunity, the Arab Islamic, was raiding and trading, not on the stock market. Trade routes like the frankincense route from Yemen up through Gaza, or whatever, Silk Road as it expands, and stealing from each other and other peoples. But it says he's going to be fighting with everyone. Now, by the way, I know it's not PC, but take Arab/Islam out of conflicts in the world. Imagine there's no Arabs, there's no Muslims today. What percentage of conflicts and terrorism in the world disappear? Besides the Ukraine-Russia war, everything ends. And it's not PC, but I don't know a lot. I teach a lot. I speak a lot on Islam. There's no question that Islamic ideology is the most aggressive expansionist of all the monotheistic faiths, right? We Jews don't believe in physical conquest. The only Jewish empire in history has been Hollywood. A complete invention of, and the A-bomb, if you saw Oppenheimer. A complete invention of the Jews and not a source of Jewish values. We don't believe in converting people. We make it hard. Christianity believes in converting people, missionaries, but they don't believe. There's plenty of Christians who in Jesus' name go and conquer this place, but it's not a mitzvah in Christianity to conquer stuff. Islam believes probably more in the physical conquest of stuff than the spiritual conquest. It's a very aggressive, expansionist worldview. So he's going to become a great nation. He's going to be very aggressive and assertive. By the way, if you backtrack to Onkelos is the Aramaic translator of the Bible who Jewish tradition says is the grandnephew of the Roman Emperor Titus, who's the general who destroyed the Second Temple and then became the Emperor of Rome. He has an arch named after him in Rome today. But what does Onkelos say? He will be a rebel against humanity. He will need everyone, and all humanity will need him. What is that the single best one-sentence description of? Exactly, oil. Think about it. When was the last time you saw something that said made in Saudi Arabia besides 19 of the 20 9/11 suicide bombers in a barrel of oil? It's the greatest curse for them and for the world that they have all this oil. It's like being a trust fund baby. You get all this wealth you didn't work for. It's kept them from industrializing, democratizing, modernizing. Some of them are getting it now, like UAE. The ones who are smart are the ones making peace with Israel. But the rest of them are just stuck. Otherwise, if they didn't have oil, what would they be doing? Riding camels in the desert and living in tents still. No, it's crazy. It's like, and it gives them tremendous political clout. Who would care what the Arab Islamic world thinks if they didn't have the leverage of all the hydrocarbon energy they do have? So it's unbelievable. It like nails it. They need everyone. Everyone needs him. His hand is in everyone. Okay, and then we go to Perkele Rabbi Eliezer. This is a midrash that is named after Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, who goes back a very long time. It's actually not. He's not the author of this, but it's an ancient midrashic collection. He says, out of the 70 languages, again, going back to the 70 original nations, that the Holy One, blessed be He, created in His world, He put His name, El, only on Yisrael. Since the Holy One, blessed be He, equates the name of Ishmael with the name of Yisrael, alas, who can survive in His day? We're being told by this midrash that because he has God's name and his name, and he's a child of Abraham, he is a force to be reckoned with. We can't just dismiss him easily like other enemies of the Jewish people. He's family, and he has, as we say in Spanish or Hebrew, protexia. Okay, so we know what happens further in the story, that Sarah, 91 years old, gives birth to Yitzhak. Don't want it to be changing diapers at that age. That's a separate topic. And Abraham said to God, when he hears that Sarah is going to get pregnant, this is totally supernatural. He says, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. God said, nonetheless, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. Notice the parallel here. It's going to be a boy, and he's named, although his name doesn't contain God's name. Okay? But so it's the same exact parallel. And I will fulfill my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. We just read through this. This is really important. In Jewish law and Middle Eastern law, what does the firstborn get? Who's the firstborn in the story? He gets the double Yerusha, and he gets the family business. What's the family business? Besides the goats. Monotheism.org, .com, and .edu. He's supposed to be the Jewish people, Ishmael. But what do you see here? God knows, he sees that he doesn't have the right stuff. So he's going to be bypassed. How do you think Ishmael feels about that? He is not happy. We have no indication from the sources in the Torah that Ishmael is not a loyal monotheist. So he's not happy. So he's being bypassed. He says, but as for Ishmael, I have heard you, meaning Abraham, you're a good friend of mine. You bless him, I bless him. I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful and increase him most exceedingly. He will beget 12 princes. What is that parallel? The Shvatim, right, exactly. And I will make him into a great nation. It's exactly what God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha. But I will maintain my covenant through Isaac. This is huge stuff. A few sentences, but it's laying out this huge pattern. He's your firstborn, but he's not the chosen one. He's not the guy who's going to make. We see in every generation, God says that, through through this son, I'll maintain the covenant. Even it means bypassing an older son. And by the way, and Ishmael kind of disappears from the scene after this. It says, and God was with the lad, and he grew up, and he dwelt in the desert. He became an accomplished archer, and he kind of disappears from the scene. But his impact does not at all. So if we go to Rabbi Chaim Vital again in Eitz Hadas, he says, were it not for God who was with us, we would have perished in the Ishmaelite exile. For as a result of having the title man, as a son of our father Abraham, he has the merit, his zchut avot. He gets merits. Abraham is his dad. As we find Abraham saying, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. We just read it. To which the Holy One, blessed be he, answered, but as for Ishmael, I've heard you. Look what he says now. He, Ishmael, also has the merit of circumcision. At what age was he circumcised? 13. Muslims are supposed to do that, by the way. I ask Muslims all the time. None of them have circumcised. Only Maasai in Africa circumcise the boys at 13 to become hunters. And if they flinch, they can't be a hunter. They're like a woman for the rest of their life. You can't get your 13-year-old to take the garbage out. Imagine telling him, stand still, this won't hurt a bit. No way, it's not happening. They take like 13. 1-year-olds, they take 13. 1 month, they have all different ways of working this out. But he also has the merit of circumcision. This is an additional reason why he's called a man, why his exile is more severe than those imposed by the 4 earlier ones, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. He has a deeper and closer connection, and he has a closer connection to God, and therefore his ability to hurt us is greater, and we can't disregard him. Now, what's interesting is, so we have a concept in Judaism that anything a person does, even if they're totally evil, has to be rewarded. Like Adolf Hitler, Yamach Shemo a million times. If he was good to his mother, he has to get rewarded for it. Where is he going to get that reward? It's going to be in this world. Trust me, this is a guy who has no olam haba. So whatever Ishmael's merits are, he has to get a reward for this. And we're being told he has merits. So if you go to the Zohar, we all know the Zohar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, writing while hiding in a cave from the Romans, going back 1,800 years ago, more than that. The Zohar in Parshat Vayera, and the Zohar is also very hard to read, it's very esoteric, it's in Aramaic, but Vayera has all the best stuff on the end of days. The Zohar says, through his circumcision, Ishmael entered into the holy covenant before Isaac was born. Said he, Ishmael's guardian angel. You know, we have this concept that all the nations in the world have a guardian angel that advocates for them, like their defense attorney. It's not literal, but how we understand this, okay, it's meant to. We don't have that, by the way. Why not? We're like the guys, you know those big office things? You have this giant office space with like the cubicles, and there's hundreds, and then there's the CEO, he's up a little higher in this big plate glass window looking out. The Jews, who are we? We are the ones sitting right next to the window with our back to the CEO so he can see our computer monitor. So if we're playing around with Facebook and Instagram and not doing our work, he sees. God is on our case directly, okay? But the guardian angel of Ishmael says, yet as Ishmael has been circumcised, he ought to have a reward. You got to pay him off. Woe, that Ishmael was born into the world and was circumcised. What did the Holy One do? What does God do? He has to get a reward. He banished the children of Ishmael from the heavenly communion. What does that mean? He's not giving him reward in the world to come for this, and he's not making him the chosen people. And he gave them instead a portion here below in the Holy Land because of their circumcision. And they are destined to rule over the land a long time, so long as it is empty. And he will prevent Israel from returning to their own land until the merit of the children of Ishmael has been exhausted. He gets to occupy. Arabs/Islam will get the land of Israel when we go into Galus. We're in Galut, they get the land until their merit expires, which is interesting. That's interesting from the Zohar there. So if we look at if you go to Jaffa Gate and you walk through the square, you've all been to Jaffa Gate, turn around and look on the back of the gate, it's Omar ibn al-Khattab Square. Omar ibn al-Khattab is Muhammad's father-in-law and the second successor, the second caliph after Muhammad, who brings Islam to the Middle East in 638 and conquers Jerusalem. That was in 638. Okay, when do the Muslims lose Jerusalem? Basically, December 1917, they surrender after the battle of the Australians. The Australian light horsemen, the last cavalry charge in Western history. They take Beersheba. They take Beersheba, they come up, they take Jerusalem. 1918, the British get control of the Holy Land. How many centuries is that? 13 centuries. And that's corresponding to the 13 years that Ishmael is circumcised. So you see the parallel right there. So if we look at Ishmael, we see His character traits. He's a monotheist. We get no indication he's not loyal to that. He's dedicated and idealistic. He seems to be. He's famous for his hospitality. He's got like a slightly warped version of it. You ever hang out? I don't know how many of you have any like Arab friends. First of all, their idea of personal space is ridiculous. Like a British person's idea of personal space is like 8 feet. New York is like 6 feet. California is like 4 feet. The Arab guy, he's got his arm around you with 2 inches from your face. It's really weird. But they're so hospitable. It's uncomfortable. Like you admire anything in the house, they try and give it to you. Please take the daughter and the camel and the coffee. So he has nomadic, the Bedouin ideal. He's confrontational. Oil he needs everyone needs him. His merits, he's a child of Abraham. He gets a blessing from Avram. He's a man of faith, hospitality, and he's circumcised. Okay, so let's put that on hold and let's go further into the story because there's another character in the story. We're not talking about Jews and just Arabs here. Isaac marries Rivka. Yitzhak marries Rivka. She also was barren for at least 10 years. One of the great patterns that we see is the creation, the creation and perpetuation of the Jewish people is always a challenge. From the beginning, we should never have come into existence. Sarah should have died childless. Every generation until today. The fact that we're sitting in this room today, back in the land of Israel, we have no idea how supernatural this is. But after at least 10 years of being barren, she finally gets pregnant. I always tell the story. I remember when my wife at the time was pregnant, round 4, and I was in the army in reserve duty on Har Uzziah on the Egyptian border. This is more than 30 years ago. This is BC before cell phones. And I remember I'm calling on the base phone, and she's freaking out because this is not the first time. This is her first rodeo, so to speak, as we say in America. She hasn't been pregnant before. But in this case, she's feeling like World War II inside her stomach. Everything's moving around. In the case of my wife at the time, she was feeling like nothing's going on. She's freaking out. You don't feel anything. It's scary, right? So what does she do? Today, what do? You go for a ultrasound, a sonogram. Okay, so the guy goes like this. Oh, there's one heartbeat. Oh, there's a second. B'shat tova, you're going to have twins. From the ultrasound to the kotel. In her case, she gets this whole prophecy. And she goes to Shem and Ever, the descendants of Noach, and to find out what's going on. And Shnei goyim v'vitnech, there's 2 nations in your womb, 2 peoples from your inside shall be separated. The might shall pass from one regime to the other. The elder shall serve the younger. Sorry. When her term to bear grew full, then behold, there were twins in her womb. Like my girls were born 6 minutes apart and look so much alike. Anyone have twins? Anyone have twins? No twins? No one's a twin? Okay, mine were born 6 minutes apart and used to look so much alike. They used to give each other their clothes and say, put this on, I want to see what I look like. It was very funny until in 12th grade in Yud Bet, one of them took the other one's Bagrut in math. And they got caught because she scored too high and they got expelled in senior year. If you ever see any of my daughters, do not mention this to them, but it wasn't so funny at the time. Okay. Anyway, very different personalities, but identical looking. These guys come out like completely different. The first one emerged red entirely like a hairy mantle, so his name was Esau. His name implies like made. He comes out like he's born with like a beard. You know, pickup truck, driver's license, shotgun rack, mud flaps. He's like a total man of action. After that, his brother emerged with his hand grasping on the heel of Esau, so they called his name Yaakov from the word heel. He's like hanging on. By the way, his twins is interesting. When I ask twins, because now I had my own, when I see twins, I go, twins? I go, yeah. He goes, who's older? Because even though they're conceived at the same time, whoever comes out first is the older one, and usually the bigger one, by the way, in terms of size, especially if it's a boy, 2 boys or 2 girls. They're kind of dominant in utero. Same thing here. Esau is the dominant one. Okay, this you can see from a Christian site. No Jews are big. Look, they're blondes. They're blondes. Give me a break. I'm telling you, Jesus wasn't blonde either. Alexander the Great wasn't blonde. What's with the blondes? Okay. Anyway, it says the lads grew up and Esau became a hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a pure man. You know, Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. So Esau seems like the right guy for the job. He's a man of action. He's a leader of men. He loves to hunt. He's out there. He's in that game we used to play in elementary school, dodgeball, you know, when you throw the ball. He's always picked first. I was like the second smallest kid in my school. I was always picked last. You know, I get hit by the ball, I go flying. Yaakov, on the other hand, is like really sweet and nice, and he's sitting in the tent, and his mom's saying, Yaakov, put the scroll down, go get some fresh air and sunshine, go play with your brother. And he's probably saying, he's going to be mean to me, So, but it seems like the story's laid out that he's going to be the Ben Bachor. He's going to get the family business. What's the family business? Monotheism.org.com and .edu. He's going to be the chosen people. And he'll be like the college professor with the patches on his elbows. But we have one story, unlike what we don't see with Ishmael. We have one story here that really shows. It's just thrown in there. Esav comes in one day, before lunch. He's hypoglycemic, a day of violence and bloodshed, and his blood sugar's low and he's irritable. And his brother's making some lentil soup. And he says, give me some lentil soup. He goes, okay, give me the birthright. Now, what should he have said? Definitely prove he's not a Jew. He said, are you kidding? This is parv. It has to at least have some meat in it. At least trade it for cholent or something. And the language is very, very truncated. It says, Yeshat v'yakem v'yalech. And he got up and he left and he ate, he drank, he got up and he left. Boom, 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 boom. Why is that story stuck in there? What's that telling us about him? He has less than zero interest in the responsibility of being Am HaNivchar. He does not want it, okay? What is he like? He's a total instant gratification guy. He's on like Amazon all the time buying stuff. I'm telling you, like every day, $5 is outside the tent. It's unbelievable. So, and then we fast forward to this story, which is fascinating. It's the story of when Yitzhak is old and blind, but his mind is fine, his hearing is great. We all know the story very, very well. These are all different versions, like Renaissance artist versions of them. It's really interesting what they look like, the clothing they wear and everything, all anachronistic. This guy's not so bad. I think that's pretty good. Anyway, but we know it's Rivka who engineers this, by the way. Right? She's the one, we know the story, dresses Yaakov up when Esav goes out to go hunting. Why does he go out to go hunting? Because Yitzhak has to be in a good state of mind, to be in a good prophetic state. By the way, to be in a prophetic state, you can't be overtired, you can't be depressed, and you can't be hungry. If you get Prozac, by the way, it says in the label, like warning, prophecy and Prozac don't mix. Like if you're a prophet, do not take this. So while he's out hunting, Rivka dresses up, we know the story very well, in the goat skin, in the clothing, so he smells like, one of the biggest questions I have on the Torah is, how hairy is Esav? You ever seen a goat? It's like cousin It from the Addams Family. This guy must have gone through like a bottle of shampoo every 2 days or something, He has to go out for a party, he has to start blow drying his hair 8 hours early. Unbelievable. But he's out and he comes in disguised as his brother and he says, come, father, and eat. You all know the story really well. And Isaac says to Jacob, come close if you please so that I can feel you, my son. Are you indeed my son or not? So Jacob drew close to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, Hakol kol Yaakov yadai midei Esav. Now again, this is a great example of the simple superficial reading or peeling a few layers off. Simple reading of the story is exactly what it says. You sound like one, you feel like the other. But if you go a little deeper, there's a very interesting insight in here. Think of it, the voice, what's going on now, even with my hoarse laryngitis voice here. Like my brain is sending electrical impulses to my mouth, my teeth, my tongues, my larynx, my throat, and it's vibrating and sending sounds across the room, which are hitting your eardrum, which is hitting your cochlear button, which is setting up a vibration, convert into electrical energy, which is going into your brain, that your understanding is abstract thought. It's unbelievable speech. Speech is uniquely human. Onkelos, when he translates in Breshit about Adam, he calls him a speaking being. Only human beings really speak. Those, like you have whales, and like there's primates that can type. They can do like 300 words. What age human being can type like 300 words? No, like a toddler has not type, but can speak like 300 words. Even the most advanced primates, whose brains are similar to ours, have a very limited vocabulary. Then you have birds that can imitate our voices, but they're bird brains. Then you have those. You ever heard whale noises? You ever heard the whale music? What are they talking about? Like what's Trump going to do in Ukraine? No, they're talking about where the kelp is. Like whatever. The ability to think abstractly and express is uniquely human. That's the call. It's associated with Yaakov. That's the voice, which is Yaakov, speech, unique expression of higher human intellect and spirituality. And that goes to Jacob, whose name is going to be changed to whom? How's his name changed later to? we are being told that the power of the Jewish people is not our physical power. I mean, we're not a big nation as a nation. We're not also the biggest people in the world. You don't believe me? Go to Holland, which is the tallest average height of people in the world is in Holland. The average man is 6 feet tall. Go to Minnesota. The average woman is 6 feet tall. We are a small nation. The power of the Jewish people has never been, that joke, what's the sign of maturity in a Jewish boy when he recognizes statistically he's got a far greater chance of owning a professional sports team than ever actually playing on one? That's not our power. Our strength has come from what? Using, as we say in Spanish, our Yiddish cup. We've had to, as Mark Twain says, the Jew has made a marvelous fight in this world in all ages and has done it with his hands tied behind him. We've had to outthink people who are stronger than us in order to survive. So we're talking about when he says, Akol Kol Yaakov, we're being told a much deeper idea. The power of the Jewish people is the power of spirituality and intellect. Meanwhile, Yadayim Yidei Esav. Just as the voice is the expression of spirituality and intellect, universally the hand, the fist, is always used as a sign of power. That's associated with physical might, which is associated with Esav, okay, which Esav becomes Edom. Who does Edom become in Jewish tradition? Right, Rome. And what does Rome become? I mean, it's a little more nuanced than what I'm saying now. Right, it becomes, just as we see Ishmael, we have Arabs, Islam, even though Islam is spread to other places. So too, we get, boom, Western civilization and the Roman Catholic Church. It's really obvious, it's the Roman Catholic Church. So we have, out of one family in 3 generations, you're going to get a lot of major forces spiritually and physically in the world. But which is a closer relationship, by the way? It's an obvious. Is it Yitzchak and Ishmael or Yaakov and Esav? Yaakov and Esav, they have the same mother, which tells you that Esav's potential is in a certain way greater than Ishmael's, because he has the same raw material, just not quite mixed in the same way. Okay, so Esav comes back, and now he's upset. He gave away the family business for the par of soup, but when it comes, now he thinks he's lost stuff. Now he's really upset because he loves stuff. Esav loves stuff. That should be like the official sweatshirt of Europe. And Esav said to his father, have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too, father. So Isaac, his father, answered and said to him, behold, of the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling, and of the dew of heavens from above. By your sword shall you live. By your brother shall you serve. Yet it shall be that when you are aggrieved, you shall cast off his yoke from upon your neck. Meaning he is reconfirming the fact that he outsmarted you. Okay, and this is a huge lesson to us. If he does what he's supposed to do and fills in the proper responsibility of being the Am HaNivchar, the chosen people, then you have to be subservient to him. But if he does not do what he's supposed to be doing in this world, you can throw him off. Interesting. So that's Rashi says. When Israel transgresses the Torah, you have the right to be aggrieved that he has taken the blessing. Because he only got it because he's on a higher spiritual level than you. This is a little side point mentioned in there, by the way. Nothing is irrelevant, of course. In Bereshit chapter 28, it says, when Esau perceived, remember he was the grand master of doing which mitzvah? Which mitzvah he did really well? Kibbut Av, not Aim. Kibbut Av. When Esau perceived that the daughters of Canaan were evil in the eyes of Isaac, his father, so Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael, the son of Abraham. So he marries. So we're being told there's going to be a connection between these two, their family, but somehow they're going to mix together later in the future. Okay, now we know what happens. The story you guys know it really well. That Yaakov has to flee. He goes to Haran, which is in Turkey, for 22 years, and he comes back after 22 years. You know the expression "time dulls all pain." Not with Esav, who's coming out to meet him with 400 men, and he doesn't. Even though it's very clear that he wants to kill him, not to go into all the story, all the funny little marks that are above when they kiss and everything. You know, Rashi jumps in and says, Omer Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, halachahi biyadua she'esav sonet Yaakov. It's a law, like gravity, that Esav hates Jacob, but he's overcome by the emotions of the moment. He makes an offer, and everything here reverberates throughout history until today. He says, Esav says to Jacob, travel on and let us go, and I will travel alongside you. Then come with me to Mount Seir. We're going to business together. Can you imagine that? The Roman Empire with a Jewish CEO? They'd probably still be in business. But Jacob doesn't want to do that because I can't live with him. I got to be in Israel, not Mount Seir. B, he's bad news. He's dangerous. He's erratic. and his kids are going to mess up mine. But he can't say that to his brother with 400 cavalry. So very obsequiously, fawning, servile, he's like, my Lord, go ahead of my servant. I will make my way at a slow pace until I come to my Lord on Mount Seir. And if it comes out of his mouth, it's got to have something happening in history later. So Rashi jumps in and says, when will Jacob catch up to Esav? And he's quoting Ovadia here, who's the smallest book of the prophets, a convert who gets one chapter. The days of the Messiah, that's when he'll finally catch up. What's interesting is the Talmud in I think it's in Bodazor Sanhedrin, I forgot exactly where it says, until this moment, Jacob and Esau are supposed to walk together in history as equals, being twins. When Jacob says to Esau, you go ahead, I'll catch up later, it's the Jewish people saying to Esau, to Edom, to Rome, to Western civilization, you go on ahead, you build your empires, you dominate the world, you get your stuff, but in the end, you, my brother, will recognize that I am really the firstborn. So he says, in the days of the Messiah, it says, sorry, I'm really having trouble with my voice, I apologize. A savior will arise from Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esav. Okay, anyway, sorry. So in the end of days, finally, we will catch up, and Esav, who's really the firstborn, will recognize that we rightfully got the birthright. So let's look at Esav for a minute here. Let's see his merits. So he is a hunter, he's a man of action, he's materialistic, physical, he is deceptive, and he's a violent person. Now, his merits are he's a child of Isaac, he gets a blessing from his father, he honors his father, and unlike Isaac, unlike Jacob, he never left the land of Israel. Hi! And there goes my brand new remote onto the floor. Okay, 1 second. So now we have all the characters in the story laid out, and now we got to put together and see how it is going to impact us today. Hopefully I didn't break this. It'd be a shame. Okay, it seems to be working. Okay, yes. So back to the Zohar in Parshat Vayera, it says, and the sons of Ishmael will fight many battles in the world. The sons of Edom, Esau, will gather against them and make war against them, some on land, others on sea, some close to Jerusalem, and one shall prevail over the other. But the Holy Land will be not delivered into the sons of Edom. So it's kind of the Jews are out of the picture here. We have two offshoot faiths historically. Think about it. Go rewind through history. Since the birth of first Christianity, then Islam, by the time Christianity takes off as a major world faith, we've lost the temple and we've moved into exile. And very few Jews are left living in the land of Israel. We are a sideshow for 2,000 years, and now two offshoot faiths are going to be duking it out with jihad and crusade back and forth over who is going to be the people who is going to take over the world physically and spiritually. And we're not even mentioned in this story. And you can see that's what's going on in the world today, by the way. There's a huge struggle going on between radical Islamic worldview and the West, which is Europe, United States, Canada, things like that. The problem is, by the way, and I have a whole other talk on this, that the Arabs' Islamic worldview and the Islam is very particularistic, and Europe has become very universalistic, which is fatal. It's great. 1,000 years ago, it's not great, but it's great. 1,000 years ago, you had crazy crusaders screaming Dus Volt, which is God wills it, fighting with crazy Muslims screaming Allahu Akbar, because both of them believed in their worldviews. Now you have a bunch of Muslims screaming Allahu Akbar still, and what's Europe screaming? Like, I feel guilty, mea culpa, that I'm a white person, and I have to, colonize the world, and it's a really interesting, scary topic. Go read Mark Stein's book, America Alone. But these guys, we're not in this scenario here. These guys are just duking it out over here and fighting amongst each other, and we're a sideshow. Okay, we've been in the news a lot in the last year because of the war, but generally speaking, the bigger struggle is much more global than just the Arab world versus Israel. If anything, Israel's portrayed as the frontline Western state as a barrier to Islamic expansion into not just the Middle East, radical Islamic expansion, but to the whole world. But we know that this is on a deeper level, not what's going on. Something deeper is definitely happening. So you have Esau versus Ishmael, but we have another question because there's a parallel thing going on at the exact same time, which seemingly Makes no sense because in Chazal, the rabbis always had two opinions about Gog and Magog. You guys familiar with Gog and Magog? The final showdown when the nations try and stop Israel. It's often viewed as the nations of the world fighting us, or there's opinions that say it's Ishmael's descendants, Islam Arabs, fighting Esav Christianity with the Jews on the sideline. And I was always thinking, how can it be both? But the reality is, it's exactly what is going on now. While radical Islam is still at war with Western civilization, what do these people have in common with? You know what this guy's saying now? Smile. And she's saying, this is not a good picture of me. Please take it again. My eye slit was not straight. This is two gay university students being publicly hung in Tehran. What did these people have in common with these people? Only one thing. The only time you can get a body-pierced lesbian activist arm in arm with a jihadi Muslim wearing his keffiyeh is over what issue? Israel. Like that we say queers for Palestine is like chickens for KFC or cows for McDonald's. I mean, it's crazy. These people will be killing each other. So this is exactly what we see talking about. On one hand, they are fighting with each other, but they'll put their differences aside to come against us. So the Zohar in Parshat Breshit says exactly this point. It says the children of Ishmael are destined at that time, meaning at the end of days, which is where we are now, to incite all the nations of the world to come to Jerusalem together with them, as it is written in Zechariah, and I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem for war. And that's the Gog and Magog scenario that we're familiar with in Yehezkel and Zechariah. Surely on that day you will come from your place at the utmost parts of the north, you and many peoples with you, all of them a vast horde, a mighty army, and you advance against my people Israel like a cloud covering the earth. It will be at the end of days that I will bring you upon my land in order that the nations may know me. And what basically the world is, you have those nations that want to destroy us, those nations that stand aside and don't do anything, and then like the United States, depending upon who's in power. Now we got Trump's there all like, yeah, and threatening Hamas, but we're in a pretty isolated position here. But this is pretty much the situation we find ourselves in. So Maimonides, in his epistle to the Jews of Yemen, and this is very unlike Maimonides, who's a real rationalist guy. He doesn't delve into this stuff very often. Look what he writes. But regarding the time of the Messianic era, it has already been made clear from the words of Daniel and Isaiah and the rabbis of blessed memory that the coming of the Messiah will take place when the hand of Edom and the Arab world will be mighty and the rule will spread throughout the world. There is no doubt about this matter. He says, when you see Islam and Christianity dominating the world, that's when it's coming. For it says, and he's quoting here Yeshayahu, he will see a chariot and a pair of horsemen, a chariot with a donkey. The chariot with the donkey is the Messiah. The pair of horsemen represents the men of war. That is to say, the alliance of two nations, Edom and Ishmael. Simply put, my friends, we're being told when you see the world uniting, even though they hate each other, to come after us, then you know Mashiach is definitely on the way. And Rav Moshe Cordovero, who lived in Sfat in the 16th century, this is who the Ari came to learn from. He writes, all the nations will ready themselves against Jerusalem and will make peace amongst themselves. They will turn against Israel to annihilate it for having reestablished its own government. We make our own state again, and they come against it to try and destroy it. It will be a time of distress for Yaakov, yet they will not collapse, but be saved from their distress. Wow. It's a pretty accurate description of what's going on in the world today. And we see, there's the useless nothing headquarters in Manhattan. I'm all for turning it into condos, by the way. Let's give the organization to the EU. What does the EU stand for? Esav United. They deserve it. But we have on one hand, we have this three-way thing going on here with Ishmael and Islam and Esav and the Jews. And it's this crazy dance we're doing. And by the way, to the extent that people in the West, especially the Christian world, identify with the Bible and the Jewish people is the extent they support us. You notice that? Those who have actually bought into the biblical vision, which evangelicals, are our biggest supporters. That's a unique group of people in the world. So, but I want to, as we come to the close here, I want to focus on, because the title of this presentation is Israel and Ishmael. What is really driving the Ahmeds, as I call them, nuts? Why are they so upset with us, the Arab Islamic world? So there's a famous Rashi in Breshit, where he says, Ishmael would pride himself over Isaac because he was circumcised at the age of 13 and did not object. He's trying to show I'm more dedicated to God than you are. You got 8 days old. You didn't remember what happened. You had no free will. You were completely oblivious. Isaac said to him, do you try and scare me because of one little organ there? If the Holy One, blessed be He, were to say, sacrifice yourself to me, give your life, I would not refrain from doing it. What's the next parsha in the Torah? Akedas Yitzchak. God says, you open your mouth, let's test. By the way, you notice it doesn't say in God tested Yitzchak. It says in God tested Avraham. Yitzchak he's a dedicated guy. Yitzchak is a total, Avraham is the sweet guy. He never wants to hurt anyone. His wife is always telling him to be mean. Get rid of her. It's interesting, by the way, you look at the characters, all the men in the Bible are like prophets on an incredibly high level, but their wives are always telling them stuff they're missing. I always tell my students in yeshiva, what do you learn from that? Women have bina yeterah. That's how you know, by the way, how Abraham was Sephardi, not Ashkenazi. God had to tell him to listen to his wife. All Ashkenazi men listen to their wives, right, guys? They're all being quiet over there. You see there? Any Sephardim here? Exactly. Anyway, so you see in the story here that they're having a fight, they're duking it out over who is more dedicated to God. And this is the essential issue that is bothering Ishmael and his descendants / Arabs, Islam, because remember, if you adopt Islam as your world, you adopt that Arab Ishmaelite personality into yourselves. They're fanatically dedicated to the idea of God. This is really what bothers them. And if you look at Islam versus Judaism, you see it is so clear, and this is only a partial list. We say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. They say, La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasul Allah. There is no God but God, Muhammad is his messenger. That's their statement of faith. We have Brit Milah, they have circumcision. We pray 3 times a day, so they got to pray 5 times a day. Okay? We bow at the waist, so they bow down at the ground. Right? We're going to wash our hands before we pray. They got to wash their hands and their feet. Okay? We have tzedakah 10%. They have to give 2.5% of the zakat of all their wealth to the charity. We have Olei Regel. They have this Hajj where they go to Saudi Arabia and they walk around this whole ritual thing. We have kashrut. They have halal. We have halacha. They have sharia. We have Yom Kippur. Now they have Ramadan right now. They're fasting. It's half-day fasts. If Ramadan were full-day fast, Islam would have been history's shortest religion. After the first 3 days of the first Ramadan, that would have been it for Muslims. Okay? We have Shabbat. They have the Friday thing. We have the binding of Isaac. They have the holiday called Eid al-Adha, where Abraham takes Ishmael to sacrifice him in Saudi Arabia. We have Tikkun Olam. They have jihad. We have modesty. They put women in potato sacks with eye holes. So they cover them up. There's nothing left. We die for our beliefs. They blow up other people for theirs. What Islam is, and I get in so much trouble for this, but it's true, is the mirror image of Judaism. Hold something in your right hand. Look in a mirror. What hand's holding it? Your left hand. He doesn't have the right stuff, which is why he's bypassed. And he gives God a really bad name. Not that all Muslims are bad people. I'm not saying that. But Islam, when taken to its radical extreme, is the worst example of giving God a bad name. Go read Jonathan Sacks' book, Not in God's Name, about this. But what's the lesson for us? So sure, we got to fight the negative lies about Israel and the Jewish people. And sure, we got to tell the world what Islam truly believes, and they got to stop being politically correct. But ultimately, my friends, if this is really going back to a struggle between us, the teeny tiny Jewish people, and the massive Islamic world of 1.4 billion people, and the massive Christian world of almost 2 billion people, it's not a battle over who's bigger. It's over who can stand up and represent God properly. And what we started with Maimonides writing to the Jews of Yemen over 1,000 years ago, and I want to end with a quote from him. And he's speaking to us today. He says, and now, brothers, you must pay attention and listen carefully to what I am going to lay out before you. Let not the strength of our enemy's hand and our own nation's weakness frighten you. And thank God we're not weak anymore. For this entire situation is no more than a trial and a test so that you can demonstrate your belief and your chosenness to the world. And we don't do that by thinking we're better or superior. We do that by doing what the job of the Jewish people is, which is not kashrut and Shabbat and halacha. That's the means to the ends. Torah, that's the software and the guidance system of the Jewish people. There's no Judaism without it. Our job is Kiddush Hashem. And what is Kiddush Hashem? Living and acting in a way that inspires other people. People are supposed to look at us and say, look at those Jews. Look at how nice they are. Look at their families. Look at how well they raise their children. Look at their communities, how they run their businesses. Look at that great little country in the Middle East. What's their secret? You ever heard that expression, imitation is the highest form of flattery? That's the shortest class you ever got on liberal democracy in Christianity. If it wasn't for us doing it better on a higher level, not that we're perfect, we're not all perfect, but doing it better on a higher level than the people amongst whom we lived, often in the worst situations, the world would not be here today. So this is a big wake-up call for us. We have to learn from this that now more than ever in a world that is so lacking in proper role models. We don't need actors, athletes, actresses, and all these other people. Most of them are bad role models. We need us, the Jewish people, to come together, be unified, to be Jews for Judaism, to first, as we say in the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, and then go out of our way to be good role models, first to our fellow Jews, to show them love and respect, and to the rest of the world. And when we come together and start doing that, just as we see in the Torah, those half siblings of ours, the full siblings of us, will not only stop fighting with us, they will, as it says, when Abraham dies, it says that Isaac and Ishmael buried Abraham. And Rashi jumps right in there and says that notice Isaac is mentioned first. He's the second born, but Ishmael will recognize that when we do it right, they will stop fighting against us, and they will say, now we recognize that God chooses you and you show us how to get the world together. And we should merit to do that soon and in our days. And thank you very much.